Karina Lysenko. I'm expert in gender equality and social inclusivity from Mexico Core International NGO, and I'm moderating this panel discussion. I would like to thank you for being there, and I would like to thank you for choosing this panel. This is a plenary session. We had no choice. Well, I almost forgot that. It's a challenging topic, but very important at that. So we are talking about intersex and about our experience in identity, our vulnerabilities being intersected, let's say, and why a person is not just one category or human being not one category, and we have to discern each other. Before we start, I would like to have a warm up, an energizer, and to be on the same page or on the same wavelength. You have two cards, as you remember, the green and the red one. Green, yes, or I, and red, nay, using British parliamentary terms. Well, are you ready? The first, intersex is a topic for just some selected communities. Do you agree with this statement? True or false? Right? The majority is green. Yes, we indeed think that this is for everyone. And statement number 2, we can be privileged in one aspect and vulnerable in another. Green, true, red, false. Majority of you are eyes. On the yeses, we're all complicated, we're all sophisticated, and that's why we are multidimensional. Third point, collective solidarity is only possible inside one community. Well, that's the topic for us to discuss, the subject matter in hand. Around this topic, we have most of the discussions, and today our speakers are going to discuss the way it is born and shaped LGBTQ plus ethnic minorities, people living with chronic diseases, and why the intersection actually sometimes generates the biggest power, the point. Vitaly Zakharchuk, head of the Ukrainian Outright International Office. Anna Leonova, executive director of All Ukrainian NGO Gay Alliance Ukraine. And we also have Ivan Tereshchuk, director of a separate branch in Odessa of LGBT League. It's also an NGO. It's an NGO. And the first round of our questions, how multiple identities influence life of the Ukrainian nation. We all realize that we have different identities, sexual orientation, gender, ethnic identity, disability, health status, age, and they are not cannot be separated or singled out. From your experience, how do the strata interact? How they form the safety and access to human rights in modern Ukraine?
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a complicated question. First of all, the law of Ukraine on social services provides exhaustive description what vulnerability is not. There are some factors of vulnerability which influence people despite of our social group. The presence of vulnerability factors is a determinant whether we vulnerable. Any gay person may have good support from his family, and he is quite okay, despite the fact that he is a gay and his sexual orientation may, in theory, in general, can make him vulnerable, but he is quite okay due to the family. While a person in rural community having kids from previous marriage and taking care of elderly parents is more vulnerable than this gay who lives in a city in a family and with family support. That is yeah, being part of vulnerable group does not mean that you're a vulnerable person. Your vulnerability depends on your inability to overcome difficult circumstances. Today, on my way here, I recollected Kiev back in 2022. Up to September 2022, Kiev looked like an empty city full of elderly people, because all the younger people, almost all the younger people left. In March, in April, there were a lot of elderly people who left in half-empty city without numerous, very scarce number of social organizations, and without any support. And within several months, the government managed to put this under control. And now, when you go around the city, you do not see these elderly people who are left alone. And this means that these people, they're still there, but they are able to stand against the difficulties, to overcome their vulnerability. That is the social solidarity and organization influences the vulnerability of vulnerable groups. Vitaly, would you like to add? Oh, we all understand that each person has a concept of vulnerability, which has been developed when a person becomes adult, and some perceptions of our vulnerability or some of our personal features, some roles are gained in result of our life circumstances. That is, we are not born to be husbands and wives, we are not born to be IDPs, although you may tell me that you may say me that well, Ukraine had been facing the situation of IDPs now and then during ages. That is, our vulnerability starts with either external trigger or from our internal needs. That is what I mean. When we enter our office, we immediately start to play a role of an office worker or our business role. When we enter our home, we start to play a role of a family member. I do not like the word vulnerability, because vulnerability is something which is a figure from the reports but each person understands the limits and beyond which it becomes vulnerable. And on the one hand, we should clearly understand that a person who wants to overcome vulnerability wants to get some assistance. On the other hand, there is a so-called learned vulnerability. There's those collectors of the humanitarian aid who can fill in the request forms, request templates in order to pick up this humanitarian aid. So what I want to say, we all have our social roles. The second, we should have clear understanding that and our social roles, they interact. S- and our social roles become activated under the influence of some social factors, and all those social roles and features, whether they promote access or they prevent us from the access, and depending on this better or hindered access, we may improve our social role, so to say. I would like to mention that this is our third event together with Anna and Vitaly dedicated to the topic of intersectionality. Quite often, our roles turn into the signs of vulnerability, although they are not sexual orientation itself. Um, uh, is not a sign of vulnerability, but in the context of Ukraine, where we lack legal protection, where we have no access to some rights, where many humanitarian programs do not respond to the needs of ЛГБТIQ people, this gains these features of vulnerability. And we all understand that in current situation, the access to some services, it worsens, and the most vulnerable are those who suffer from several features of vulnerability, like people with a disability and ЛГБТИК people. We have been saying that the vulnerability features should be taken into account in spreading the humanitarian and ensuring humanitarian response, but it does not change. Our session in a small room inspired me to ask the next question. One of the questions was about the power of lesbian women, and whether there is any gap in support inside the LGBT community, whether women always experience this gap in support. Well, let us speak about humanitarian response, but not about communities. humanitarian response envisages that there is a separate support of women, that women in general, they are a vulnerable group, and there are programs which cover the needs of women. One of our programs which we had been implementing with Oxfam support, this was support of LGBT women. If we discuss humanitarian response, I cannot say that there is a deficit in programs that offer assistance and support to women. Another thing is that humanitarian programs with the LGBT component are performed, are carried out by those organizations which are ready to be tolerant to LGBT communities and are prepared to this cooperation, but they expect that people who will come to them will come to they and say, hello, I'm gay, can you help me? And in many of such programs, no gays, no LGBT community members showed up. They do not see this their clients, the LGBT clients, because they expect these people to be coming out and to say, "Can you help me?" This is not so easy. Many members of LGBT community are not courageous enough to show up their sexual orientation in a community which has no markers how they work with the LGBT community. We have heard about gap, gender gap that we as a women felt. Perhaps I will turn off my thinking as a man and turn on my work, my experience as a civil activist, funding of experience or funding of access to humanitarian programs had become a problem, so to say. Looking at 9 neighboring countries, I can tell you that Ukraine is in much better condition than many other clusters. Our humanitarian needs are covered by Europe and some international humanitarian agencies and donors who focus their work on Ukraine. If you look on Myanmar and Haiti, we will find out that humanitarian organization in Haiti received the last grant 7 years ago. So they deal with the activism and volunteering. As to the access to services, Anya, thank you for mentioning donors and those organizations who do not focus on LGBT, but still get funding for them. I may recollect the latest donor who covered 70% of our funding. They had separate policy as to inclusion of LGBT. And without covering LGBT community, you might lose funding from those big donors. And I should say that majority of international donors, they either have such policies or they are very loyal towards such policies. And In many such organizations, I see this requirement to have services for LGBTIQ, but among many of them, I do not see how this work with LGBTIQ is monitored. I like a situation when international organizations approach to me and say, you know, we have funding for LGBT. Can you provide me with information about LGBT with whom to work? And I immediately say to them, well, let's change an approach. And I agree with Elena that quite often money allocated for LGBT, they do not reach LGBT communities. They just stack at the level of local organizations. In Ukraine, we have 10 huge national organizations which have 700, 800 employees, and with that is huge budget. And they are happy to report about the big LGBT communities who are recipients of that help. And I would like to say very controversial thing. Each year we pass the humanitarian response plan where LGBTIQ is part and coordination center. And actually the document which is produced is signed by the humanitarian assistance from international organizations, Mr. Matias Schmal, and the government of Ukraine. This is a huge fundraising document which later is presented in Geneva at the meeting of all the countries, and presenting this plan. International donors say we need $12 to $12 billion of dollars or $12 billion of dollars for humanitarian response in Ukraine. These are money, and then UN allocates its money. And part of this money is used by the state, and they also grant users here. If you believe that everything is okay with that funding and that money only do not reach last year, we managed to cover the initial plan with 70%. That is, we requested for 10 million of money, $10 million for humanitarian means, and received $6.5 million, while this year we have received only 43%. We requested for 10 million and received only 4 million. For the next year, humanitarian coordination will cut down the requested funding. We were informed that there is not enough money. money goes to those who requested for money on timely basis. How who request to this money via needs assessment. You as a humanitarian organization should make needs assessment. Then you can meet with me in Zoom and request for presentation of your needs at the top level. We have technical working group. You can make this presentation at the technical level. Then you can go to a cluster and present your needs at the cluster level. When you present the needs of your community, of your organization, then it becomes a foundation for writing down a plan of humanitarian response. So when your document, when your needs are presented in this system of humanitarian response, then it becomes part of the plan and you may expect to get funding. Ukraine is the first country out of more than 100 countries in the world where they, in general, have a humanitarian response. And for the first time during 160 years of humanitarian response existence, we have indicated LGBT communities 24 times in our humanitarian response plan, and we managed to do this due to all our communities that paragraph about LGBT communities had been being deleted many times, but this time we managed to include LGBTIQ. This year we included it into 4 sections, including intersectionality, and I suggest you to raise up your requests up to the cluster level, and then we will be able to present your needs about funding, your needs and funding at a higher level. I'll continue in your response. My question is to Ivan. People living with chronic diseases, people living with HIV. Do humanitarian organizations look at them as a separate community, or they are just like a subgroup within LGBT community? Looking at historic experience of Ukraine, we do not have such an experience. As for the use of resources and gender disbalances in resources for LGBT, part of LGBTIQ organizations in Ukraine, historically, they had shaped around HIV organizations because these were MSM organizations, and now humanitarian assistance, it focuses the attention on HIV services, and that's why men receive more assistance than women. So this is a gender-based distortion. As HIV, as to your question, HIV are not separated, but international donor, they include LGBT into humanitarian response, and quite often this assistance is formal, and humanitarian organizations mentioned that they provide a lot of humanitarian assistance to different vulnerable groups, including LGBTIQ. And since these organizations, they have this wide range of customers, wide range of delivered services, then in the eyes of a donor, they are more efficient and they more often will get funding. A person who then LGBTIQ people would not apply to these general humanitarian organizations. Um, and quite often people do not understand why sexual orientation decreases access to some assistance. I hope I have answered your question. May I add something? You said a lot of important things. I should emphasize that non-LGBT organizations can and should work with LGBT capacity and trainer potential among LGBT organizations is sufficient to organize trainings for those broader organizations about proper terminology, about proper approach. Last autumn, we spent a lot of time. We have organized several trainings for Caritas. At the beginning, I was very much afraid of Caritas, and my fears appeared to be larger than what we have got. In Odessa, we have huge success with Caritas. They, of course, they do not write that they support us, but they post our QR codes and people can find us and come to us through Caritas. Can you imagine that? And so the system of readdressing is important. I suggest to shift our focus of attention from social sphere and to discuss one more element of intersectionality. How are we seen by others and what we lack to interact with others? Have you ever caught yourself being judgmental as to a person not knowing his or her experience? Have you ever made assumptions about a person whom you do not raise a red card if you believe that, if you think that your organization suffers from wrong assumptions? This actually confirms my previous assumptions. So when you think about your the community, what would you like to present better to other communities, and what you would like to be asked by other communities about yourself?
Well, Alexander, thank you very much for your opinion at your panel. Alexander, I'd like to remind you, said that many brothers called him after the coming out. I worked in Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast for many years at the contact line. Well, and never had any issues on the among the writers about my orientation, there were some funny situations, but they would laugh, have a quiet laugh together over it, because the most stupid question is the one that is never asked. So I'm open for the questions. And what happens in the society? The society is blind, and they just see their own expectations, things they expect from a person, but they are not prepared to see a person as self-fulfilled, accomplished, valuable, enriched with experience, and of course adorned with certain traits and peculiarities. So if you have the coming out experience when you talk to a person and spend some time, and then you do your coming out, they say that they don't care usually, because they learned already to value you as a person. Now, just to remember people who try to defend traditional values, and they say, sodomites, what's the word? Sodomites, and they should be shamed. They have sex, group sex in their flats, 20, 40 people, scores of people. So, where have you seen these people is the immediate question. Well, the situation, what I'm driving at is this. Perhaps this is herd kind of thinking and group dynamics where you cannot discern an individual and you think in stereotypes. And then when you have a certain certain people, when you have already covered this distance and coming out, they start telling you that they've never thought about it. While having a smoke, I shared the story. We have colleagues we just communicate by email for more than 1.5 years. And they first worked in Moldova and then had a contract in Ukraine. And I was very happy because they came back to Ukraine, and now we have more people as expats, and we can have this international movement as regards LGBTQ+. And I know some locally representatives of the international organization. They, them, who is coming? How will this look? And so, and people who have never dealt with LGBTQ+, and that was just a 2-hour training when they were indoctrinated. Well, this, and there is a boss with them as a pronoun. Well, can you imagine the number of stereotypes in the central part of Ukraine when they happened? I understand who you are hinting at, Anna. Well, let's stop that stereotypes and stereotype. In our life is a norm. We all use stereotypes. And that makes it simpler for us to analyze things around us. It's a different situation, though, when those stereotypes have negative implications and they induce some discrimination or instigate. And there's no other option but Eurasian interpersonal relations, for interpersonal relations. Last year, while working with partner organizations, we're the principal partners of Oxfam, and we had a strategic session with Roma organizations. And since that, we've had some joint events. We would invite them to us, we would visit them in their place, their community. And of course, it's easier to invite someone to a place, because this community is, LGBTQ plus. We are more adaptable, adjustable, more resilient as regards challenges, and that's why we feel quite easy with ethnic backgrounds like Roma, for example. I don't know about people staying with living with a double stigma, bisexual, of Roma origin, for example. But there also we have this point, and we should not forget about it. This is about the shaping of communities. When you are born a Romani person, you become part of the group immediately. That's your identity. That's your way in life. And the same is true with all the ethnic groups, and the same is happening to the faith groups, religious groups. People who discover a faith, the novices, but this is your space for strategy shaping. For LGBTQ+, our space is very important for us because we are not identified as gay or lesbian immediately. It's 13, 15, sometimes 35 years of age. And there's this painful feeling that this is not something pre-established or protected as a community. Of course, the feeling is a bit insecure and not easy to deal with, but we have to deal with it, and there's some room for work, I suppose. Well, we keep discussing different identities, and you have started answering my previous question. Let's talk about joint barriers in your everyday life. People from other groups, perhaps having nothing to do with LGBTQ+, but perhaps they come across the same kind of uncomfortable situations and challenges. Well, let me say that there are two common barriers that actually make everything else the function of it. It's lack of exception and lack of visibility. It seems to me that the bubble people have to live in as activists, all the problems have been discussed. We all know about LGBTQ+, well, everyone is aware, which is not true, of course. The general public, in its major part, have no idea. And the same is true for other such communities. There's no consensus about accessibility, inclusivity. We do not understand as a society how to arrange accessible in structures, infrastructure for people with disabilities. And what pains me personally, well, in Odessa, this is a multicultural city. Because of this diversity, it's a seaport, tourism destination, but we have racism, ethnic prejudice, regardless, and these are cross-section problems. Now, I would like to add to our previous discussion what people should know about me as a gay person. Well, there are lots of myths and stereotypes, and some you cannot pick up something special. I would like to discuss some inner prejudice. We're not a community as such. There is nothing uniting us. People live with their identities as gay or lesbian, and this is a relative. The trans people, and we have to arrange for understanding, appreciation inside the bubble before we open up and start our external communication. Anything from you, Vitaly? That reminds me, Ivan, met the macho culture in gay. If you want to be a great gay, you have to be have muscles for tequilas with the height being 2 meters tall, and the age, the size, you know what I mean, the income, and that's when people invite you to have a coffee together. Otherwise, it's just a failure. You're doomed. I am not sure about lesbians. Let me tell you from my own experience. When you every day you come across people from the community, they're your friends, your close acquaintances. You are inside this bubble and you think that everyone is knowledgeable, aware, appreciative, and then you come across some comments and you understand that there's no solidarity as such. It's far from that, and this, as far as the society is concerned, of course. Let me add to this humanitarian response or relief, but broader speaking, we have this terrible war raging, and we have to face it. We've faced it for 4 years. The actual beginning onset was in 2014. Perhaps I cannot put it in the right language. So this country that actually faces the after effects after the war. Everything is difficult for everyone, and they turn to conservative values as they resort to them. That's something I'd be happy if it is different after our war, but the further away we are from the warfare, then the short is the short. Shorts people wearing. That's conservative. Why length of shorts? Because you remember Ukraine, our space in the 40s, and then how the trousers, the length of the trousers. This is historically the fashion and the acceptable norms. The shorts, getting short and getting longer, basically, as a cultural emblem, let's say. We are now at this threshold, and we have this barrier because it's not just about LGBTQ plus. This is about all people who are different. If you are different, according to some specific features or some peculiarities, you are to be discriminated. Well, let's discuss another issue. If everyone is different and no one is accepted, so I'm trying to make a bridge to our next topic, solidarity in some strategies on paper and discussions, but in your opinion, how does this solidarity look in practical terms? Well, this is a WHO-based the well-being research for the south of Ukraine, for LGBTQ plus community. One of the things which made us look differently at certain things, that was the realization that LGBTQ people very often choose to stay in an unsafe area, the war zone, because there is a surrounding there. The older they grow, the more they are inclined to make such decisions. Women staying in Kherson, this is very close, close indeed to the hostilities area. Being offered different assistance programs, evacuation options and opportunities, people say, I know everyone here, I'm known to everyone I care to know, communicate with. So it's very important. This is their personal feeling of security. Security is basically shaped by the surrounding availability of such a society. The older they are, the less adaptable, the less adjustable they grow. And this is a decisive factor. Now about solidarity as such. Well, we can feel solidarity as people when we have empathy, or when we have this fellow feeling, when we can share. We might not have our personal experience of the same sort, but we have to feel this empathy against injustice, discrimination, vulnerability of sorts. Well, in my opinion, there's no other way. You have to be open, you have to be ready and to discuss some sensitive, some intimate things. So there's no other way in my book anyway. Well, thank you. It was very difficult for me to deal with the notion of solidarity. It's not really applicable in my experience, so I will make a short intervention. I'm talking to the international donors, telling them that we need flexible funding or small grants for small organizations. Ivan was right. Most of us have this HIV service background. 13 to 15 years ago, I started as an outreach associate and so forth. So it was very interesting back then because they provided many supporting programs for local organizations, community-based organizations. And we had trainings, fora, workshops. Everyone would be house trained with the skills of awareness materials, one thing, advocacy, another thing, how to write letters, to draft read, how to do budgeting. Grant applications. Sviatoslav Sharamet had this beautiful training, sex, open conversation, frank conversation. They wouldn't onboard me. Let me complain here. I failed with my application for this workshop, but you're right that we're staying in the bubble. But we all, every one of us, is active beyond. Eugene made that documentary, is now making another. The scripts. Sviatoslav, we heard it from one of the participants. Sviatoslav does open public advocacy, and there are many points to be taken into account. There should be some kind of stipend for creative people, for experts who have some productive ideas, and they come and say, Vitaly, for our film, for our video, for our concert, we need such and such amount of money for one activity. And Vitaly, of course, not out of the pocket, but from the special account, I can fund this initiative. Yes, to have this somewhere to apply to and to make this successful. Why? Well, unfortunately, not a training for 20 minutes, but I'm condensing it. For intersection, we need to work with a win-win principle. There's this win-win principle, and we have lose-lose principle or loss-loss principles. For that, we have to strike this golden balance, like for social workers in the field, to teach them how to work with any kind of category and vulnerability that comes their way. We can do that not just with the specializing organization. We have to surround the social workers with a media program, some kind of materials, some kind of personal stories, some kind of personal moments, and reference points, and then supervision with Gay Alliance or Alliance Global. So I cannot work with intersex people or trans people. Let me speak up. And Alliance Global in Lviv makes a special session for this person to get support, for them to get support and continue with their work. Why loss? Because there none of the organizations can gain 100% of funding and cover all Ukraine. Everywhere we have to strike this golden balance. Speaking of inclusion, I worked for 2 years with inclusion. This is a household word, at least in to my mind. But where's the end of inclusion? We are talking about inclusion. What's absolute inclusion? I'm asking myself. Tell me about the service point and what kind of profile should be for it to be inclusive. How many points how many items should be checked? How many boxes ticked? What is the level? What is the font to use for information materials? What should be the language? And how many languages should these social workers speak? Right. In my opinion, if we discuss this, this is about developing joint rules or common rules, the playbook in a positive sense, making social services as inclusive as possible through intersection. When we treat a person as an agent with many vulnerabilities. And another thing is comprehensive support for the community so that they can be empowered. Empowered with their voice amplified and nothing happening behind the curtains. Well, now we have discussed the community from inside, but my notion of solidarity. Perhaps you are not unhappy with this term, but are there any real examples when people from other communities, perhaps Roma organizations, people with disabilities, when they would do something practical, letting you know that they support LGBTQ+. I can share a story here. This story is related not with the full-scale invasion as such. That was in 2019. And I'm from Odessa originally. And in Odessa, we have Odessa Pride events and great challenges we had in Odessa. I would call at several local initiatives, some organizations, for support, because it was quite challenges, and I immediately realized that, and while looking for them, I got a lot of excuses, a whole bunch of them, reasons why they cannot do that. There was just an initiative that said, all right, we will join the march. And that was Oleksiy Chumакov. If you know, he He's Catholic, and in 2020 he died, unfortunately passed away, but I was surprised that in Odessa and the whole Odessa and 2030 meetings, only that Greek Catholic community agreed to support us. And when I talked to Father Alexei, discussing his reasons, he said, we know what persecution is. It's very important for the people, well, his parishioners, for his flock, to understand and appreciate what it means to be much harder persecuted than their own group. So it is very important to feel in the shoes of the really vulnerable people, understanding all the implications and outcomes and possible consequences. Thank you. So, Ivan, would you like to add anything after that? We have 2 or 3 questions from the floor. Well, let me say that the kind of solidarity that you discussed beyond our boundaries is developing, not really steadily because it's the top bottom process. International partners make venues, joint venues for different organizations and different walks of lives, different life in different parts of the country. And it works. It's a bit it's imposed, but we find some points in common. Well, as league organization, we are working with the International Nations Foundation. After all those years, I can now say that I'm one of the Soros grant eaters, quote, quote, but they localize, and I can see that in our joint activities with the local partners, they more often start taking interest in us and supporting us. But the challenge that we had was in finding this common interest. Well, that's it. That's the way it is. So we understand that this topic is quite difficult. It requires discussions, not just discussions. A couple of questions from the floor, please, as I promised earlier. Turn on the mic, unfortunately, is not on. There's no input for the interpreters. The mic is off, so we cannot interpret this question. Right. Certain NGOs that exist or get those grants from time to time in order to stay afloat, basically. The worse, the better. That's their approach, because it's when it gets better, the funding is stopped. And this is not just other communities. It's also our own, say, circle. And that's what I see and observe from the outside, because I'm not an insider. I do not live in this bubble of such beneficiaries. But speaking of cooperation among vulnerable communities, in 2023, I had a radio project. It was beautiful. Radio public broadcaster and stream radio in Ivano-Frankivsk, 5488. That was the number of the draft back then, perhaps you remember, and we had every issue dedicated to certain categories, Roma people, and other vulnerable categories. But what was important, now I would like to unite people doing some press conference or online, the categories, because, and also, you know, in this society, I would like to say that I wouldn't get any members of the LGBTQ community volunteering, because it's much easier, much more comfortable just to stay in your niche or your bubble, for that matter. Let me provide some feedback. I tried to give this example when communication, not with an NGO. And there is a matter of principle. Speaking of solidarity, solidarity is not for the NGO sector, because NGO sector is ruled by specific specific tenets, let's say, precepts. They have 6 to 10 score organization abiding by some rules. No matter how they treat you, you're accepted. But when you arrange communication not in the format of joint projects or big funding or communication and personal attitude, one starts wondering. When I see this solidarity in real terms, well, this is about being a good neighbor and sharing the consequences, facing the consequence together. I'm that kind of a person. When I plan something, I'm ready to be exposed, and I don't want to be. I'm ready to be alone in that, but I'm happy when I'm not. And people should join me not because of the money, but because of the real, actual solidarity. Another question, 2 questions. We have plenty of time for that, I think. And at the regional level, you see the LGBTQ plus is not criminalized, but there are some jurisdictions where this choice is criminalized, and we have to express solidarity with the drug addicts. There's a very difficult stigma, HIV and other dangers, lots of criminalized groups, and there we have this joint work among different regional, different communities rise to decriminalize. It's not necessarily legal, but there are many concepts and ideas about the joint effort and shared ideas. And it is very important not to draw any comparisons. For them, it's a matter of choice. We had no choice. They sell sex, and that's their choice. They use drugs, and that's their choice. So the less we compare, the easier it is to have the solidarity. And the white hats and the black hats, and all this confrontation. And this means less stigma and pressure inside the community, because it's normal to take drugs, but it is criminalized. I do not know what we should say in response, but because it was just a comment and a question, please. Andrei Chernyshov, Alliance Global National LGBTQ Consortium. Hannah took it from my lips, but I would like to get down to the national and even local level from the international one. Our organization, our consortium, for many years cooperated with key players and, so to speak, vulnerable groups. And this cooperation is done with the national advocacy, stability of services, public health, and, well, let's say we provide assistance to other communities, drug addicts, commercial sex workers, sex workers, whichever they choose, ideologically, technical assistance, paralegal assistance, and so we have the National Paralegal Hub, and at the local level, also our coordinators, the organizations, they cooperate with different self-organized groups, and it's quite all right, and I think satisfactory what we have with HIV, people living with HIV, Romani groups. It's a bit less encouraging with the people with disabilities, but I think this is for everyone, this is a sort of stumbling block, unfortunately. But let me say a couple of words about this previous discussion, or contributing to the previous discussion, the LGBTQ plus initiatives locally. I would like to say the national conference, this conference has this grant-given experience, not just to small organizations, but also initiative groups not registered at all, perhaps not having enough capacity to apply to bigger players providing funds. That was 2019, if I'm not mistaken. And after another national conference, I don't remember the exact number, but with 5 or 6 microgrants for all sorts of initiatives, arts initiatives, and different, all sorts of initiatives, and without any exception, public healthcare, pride, you name it. We supported all sorts of initiatives from all sorts of parts of the country. And let me say that we are in active communication with our partners. Localization, that's when the funding, without any intermediaries, go between local initiatives directly being supported directly. And we are now discussing this issue, providing assistance to Ukrainian national LGBTQ plus to issue microgrants for organizations with impaired capacity, operating very locally, community-based, for us to be able to implement some initiatives to increase our visibility among the local authorities, local self-governance, and so forth. The more we sit here, the more excited I get to continue this over the lunch break. And I think this topic can never be exhausted, but still I have to thank you. Let's greet our keynote speakers with a round of applause. We have mentioned things, intersection, solidarity, but if you dive deeper into that, start breaking it down, it can be boiled down to our everyday life. Everyone experiences that. I'm sure that everyone in this panel discussion can draw their own conclusions. I'm doing that, and thank you very much.